Going?
Going.
Okay. I'm Madeline Wiegner, and with the help of my wife Erica, I'm going to show you how to use the teach back method of training somebody on a new technique. And tonight we're going to demonstrate it with a batter bread recipe. Batter breads are a kind of outdated technique. They fell out of favor after the 1970s because of the advent of the stand mixer. And I think because of yuppies getting really into artisanal bread making. I discovered them while looking for something that was a little less physically arduous to make after a period of sickness recently. This is a pretty great technique for making bread for anybody who has like diminished physical capacity or limited mobility, because it is a lot faster and physically easier. So to make the bread, you need 3 cups of flour, a tablespoon of sugar, a teaspoon of salt, 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast, and then your add-ins, which tonight we're going to do dried onion and dill weed. For the wet ingredients, you'll need 1 1/4 cups of warm water and 2 tablespoons of oil. You start the recipe out by taking 2 cups of the flour and putting it in the bowl with a tablespoon of white sugar, a teaspoon of salt, 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast, and whatever add-ins you want, and then hold back the last cup of flour until the end. You next add the warm water and 2 tablespoons full of oil. At that point, you take a wooden spoon and you'll beat it fairly vigorously for about 25-30 strokes. You want to beat it until you start seeing strands forming in the batter. This lets you develop a lot of the gluten in the bread without having to really put your shoulders into it the way you would with a traditional bread dough. Once you see those gluten strands forming, you can stop beating the bread. At that point, you would add the last cup of flour, a little bit at a time, and stir it in gently until the bread reaches what looks like a good consistency. At that point, you're just going to cover it loosely and let it rise for 25 to 30 minutes. After 25 to 30 minutes, you'll beat it down, put it in a bread pan, let it rise for another 20 minutes, and then bake it at 375 for 45 minutes. All right. Did that make sense to you, Erica?
I think so, yes.
Great. Can I get you to show it back to me, please?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my dry ingredients in the bowl, save 1 cup of flour.
Yes.
And I have the list of ingredients here. So I need 2 cups of flour. There's 1 cup. And 2 cups.
Great.
Then it's the tablespoon of sugar. Can I ask, is this usually like a rounded or just like flat tablespoon?
I just usually do a flat tablespoon.
Okay.
In most recipes, I would cut it down some more, but for this, a tablespoon of sugar is a good amount.
Awesome. All right. And then a teaspoon of salt.
Yes.
And 2 1/2 teaspoons of yeast.
2 1/4.
2 1/4.
But I always eyeball it anyway.
Yeah. Good, because I'm going to eyeball it too.
All right.
There's 1. There's 2. That's about 1/4.
Yeah. This recipe is pretty forgiving too, which is also nice.
Yes. And so now I'm going to do the add-ins. We're having borscht tomorrow, so I'm doing dehydrated onions and dill weed because those sounded like they would go good with borscht.
Yeah.
And any precise measurements on this? Just kind of eyeball it?
I just kind of throw some in. Like I would say 1/4 cup to 1/2 cup, depending on how much onion you love.
Well, I love onions, so.
A little more, yeah.
And then dill weed. Just gonna do like a capful.
Yeah, that's good. You probably want to do more with fresh herbs because they're not as strong as dry, but that's a good amount for a dry herb.
That makes sense. Okay, so I'm just gonna really quickly just mix these together.
Yeah, you've got your dry, you've got your add-ins. The next step is the wet.
The next step is the wet. Okay. So 1 1/4 cup of warm water.
Mm-hmm. And just warm on your wrist is a good temperature.
Yeah.
Not too hot because that'll kill the yeast.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels good. One and a quarter cup. And 2 tablespoons of oil.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to dump this in.
Yep, just dump it in, put the oil on top.
Use the same tablespoon so we don't have to wash 2 tablespoons. One, 2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I'm gonna mix this until I start seeing like strands forming.
Mm-hmm. Forming the gluten, and you want to mix pretty vigorously.
Okay.
It's going to form a wet batter. Come in over the top here.
Whoa.
Yeah, you're starting to see it a little bit. See, like when it pulls away from the side of the bowl, you're going to get those strings coming in like that.
All right.
That shows you that the gluten's forming.
All right.
So once you have all of the flour mixed in, if those strings are forming, you can stop mixing and add the last of the flour.
Okay, that's what I'm going to do then.
Mm-hmm. And since flour weights can be a little variable, like I usually add the last cup pretty slowly.
Yeah, totally. Is there like a special way to tell that the dough for this is properly formed?
It's incorporated all of the flour. It'll still be a little sticky. It's a wet dough. Like I could throw a half a cup in to start.
Okay. I can definitely see those strands.
It's looking good. Definitely needs some more flour.
Oh, yes.
Basically, it should all be sticking to itself more than it sticks to the bowl. But there should
sense.
still be a little bit of cling because it's not going to be like springy and
a boule or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. It is a batter bread.
How's that looking?
That looks pretty good. I'd say like another couple tablespoons.
Yeah.
And you'll be there.
Alright, this is really easy. I see why you like making bread this way.
Yeah, it's super easy, and it is a really good recipe if you do have like poor upper body mobility.
I just don't like, I don't know, whenever I need bread on the countertop, I just get kind of perplexed at the mess.
Yeah, this is definitely easier. Yeah, so, yeah.
Awesome.
You've got all of that hanging to itself real well. I'll usually take a knife and kind of scrape off the... Yeah. And at this point, I would just grab a towel off of the shelf and cover it.
All right.
For 30 minutes until it's roughly doubled in size.
Should I like wet the towel or anything?
No, it won't rise that much.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
All right.
gonna stick these in the sink. Grab a towel.
And so just for the purposes of time and not having to edit, we're obviously not going to show the entire cooking process, but would you mind telling me back the last couple steps in the bread making process?
Of course. So I'm going to let this rise for about 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to punch it down and divide it and put it in a bread pan. Or I'm not actually sure if I'm going to divide this or not, but put it in a bread pan. And once that has had a chance to rise for about another 30 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bake it at a temperature for an amount of time.
375 for 45 minutes.
375 for 45 minutes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.